All right, Daily Ticker Time here on a Monday, brought to you by Pelican Brewing. Visit pelicanbrewing.com for more details on locations, events, award-winning beers, independently brewed since 1996. Pelican Brewing, born at the beach. Let's talk some Blazers because Minnesota's gotten to a conference finals. If they can do it, we can do it, right? If they have hope, we can have hope at some point.
Need Ann Edwards.
We need an Ann Edwards. That would help. And also a coach. And who's going to be the coach next year? We're not quite sure. Sean Highkin joining us now, our good friend of the Rose Garden Report. Go give him a follow on Twitter at Highkin. Sean, good morning to you. You got a piece up about Chauncey Billups and just the unique nature of what is happening right now. And I'm just wondering, like, from a surface level, how do you make this one make sense? He doesn't seem like he wants to be here. Doesn't seem like the Blazers are too thrilled with him coming back, but they don't want to fire him, but he's not just going to walk away from money. What the hell's going on here?
That's essentially what it is right now, as far as just, you look at the facts of what the situation are. Chauncey is going into the final guaranteed year of his contract. They have a team option for 25-26. They could pick it up if they wanted to. They haven't picked it up. And so he's going into the year with basically a lame duck contract. He has to fill out 3 assistant coaching spots because they didn't renew the contracts of his lead assistant, Scott Brooks, or his brother, Rodney Billups. And then Steve Hetzel left to take a job on Brooklyn's staff last month. So they had 3 assistant coaching spots to fill. So it's like, it's just a whole lot of there's just a whole lot of uncertainty right now. And then, you started seeing these reports of, like, maybe he's in the mix for the Phoenix job or he's in the mix for, some of these other jobs. And then, and all the while, he's under contract. He is their coach for next season as of right now. It's just, it doesn't feel like it's long-term a very tenable dynamic, especially when you consider that he said at his exit interview that he hopes that they're focusing more on competing for the playoffs next year and less on trying to develop. And then Joe Cronin at his exit interview the same day said that, we're not good enough, so our focus is still on getting more talent and developing the talent that we have. I don't have the quote in front of me, but that's essentially what Joe said. And then Chauncey said basically the opposite. So it feels like what's probably going to happen is that they're going to let Chauncey finish out his contract for this season, and he's going to lose another 55 or whatever games that they lose because the team is not going to be very good. Like, this team wouldn't be very good with Eric Spoelstra coaching them. So it's not, they're not necessarily the coach's fault, but they're going to lose a lot of games. And then when Chauncey's contract is up, and maybe at that point, depending on how next year's lottery shakes out or what other roster moves are made, they're ready to take a step forward in the rebuild. And at that point, usually when a team is ready to take a step forward in a rebuild, usually that's when they decide to go in a different direction as far as the coach. So it seems like it's kind of headed that way, where they're just going to kind of play out the string and run out the clock on the contract and then decide to go their separate ways. But it's not the greatest dynamic in the world. It's not the most comfortable dynamic in the world, but that feels like kind of where it's headed right now.
Yeah, I get it from Chauncey's perspective, and I enjoyed the piece at Rose Garden Report. Again, Chauncey, it makes sense. Your record is like already, 32% winning percentage. He's already got an awful record. It'd take years to dig out of that. And if you add 55 more losses to it, it's only going to dip even lower. I guess I don't really understand it from an organizational standpoint. Like, if you don't want him to be your coach, he's not your long-term solution. The buyout doesn't, I guess, financially appear to be all that much to just say, thanks for your services, I'm going to go hire the guy I like, or woman, whoever it is. I don't really understand, I guess, the thinking here from the organization of, he's not our long-term guy, but we're not going to pay him a buyout and go find maybe the next Mark Daigneault and just have him develop Scoot in year 2 and Shaden in year 3, hopefully staying healthy, and just see where you're at with the young guys going forward at that point.
Yeah, and I think in the short term, I don't think it's they want Chauncey gone, because him and Joe Cronin have a very deep mutual respect for each other and a very long relationship that goes back over 30 years, actually, because they used to play high school basketball against each other in Colorado back in the 90s. But it's more just like, the reality of the NBA is usually just that somebody who is here at this stage of the rebuild, especially when they're hired by a different GM, isn't the long-term guy and is probably going to be replaced at some point. I don't think it's that they want him gone, because Chauncey is very well respected in the organization and among the players. I'll say this: I've never covered a 21-win team that had as good of a locker room as this team had, in terms of like everybody gets along, everybody's bought in, everybody plays hard, nobody's like mad that a guy is playing over them, like all that kind of stuff. And I think, however you feel about Chauncey, I think you have to give some of that credit to him and his staff for getting guys to continue to be bought in. So in the short term, there is, if the guy's under contract, it's not like it's, detrimental to have him coach the team for another year. It's just a question more of, does what the Blazers' reality is going to be for the next few years line up with what he wants out of his coaching career as far as what his goals are? And then does that line up with what the Blazers' goals are for the next few years of the rebuild? And from both sides, I think long-term beyond this year, the answer is probably no, but it's also just kind of I know you said the buyout isn't that much, but it's also like, do you want to pay two coaches when you're going to suck next year anyway? It's like, no matter who, like I said, Eric Spoelstra is not going to make this team a playoff team. They're going to lose no matter who they have as their coach. So why would you pay a second coach? That's kind of probably how the organization is looking at it. And the other thing is that if you are going to fire your coach, usually who you're going to hire right away. Like you already kind of have a good idea of what you're going to do to replace them. Like it's pretty, you saw with the Phoenix thing which Chauncey's name kind of came up in connection with in some degree that we still don't kind of know the full extent of. But from what I understand, when they fired Mike Budenholzer, or when they fired Frank Vogel, they kind of already had a good idea that Mike Budenholzer was who they wanted and that he was going to take the job. When Neil Olshey fired Terry Stotts, he had already pretty much decided that he was going to hire Chauncey Billups. Usually, if you fire a coach, especially somebody who's a name like that, you know who you're going to have to replace them. And it's kind of, at this point in the summer, in the off season, it's kind of late in the game to, because, some of these other, bad teams have already made coaching changes, Brooklyn, Charlotte, a couple of other. I think Washington is still in the middle of their coaching search right now. But when a lot of the candidates that you would maybe be looking at, whether it would be like Jordy Fernandez, who Brooklyn hired, or Charles Lee, who Charlotte hired, those are the types. If the Blazers were to have made a coaching change after the end of this season, that's a lot of the same types of guys and types of candidates that they probably would have been looking at, because they're in the same place organizationally that those teams are in. And now some of those names are kind of off the market. So at this point, it probably makes more sense to just kind of wait until the next cycle and do this next year. That's kind of where I think their heads are at right now.
Interesting. There's a lot there that I would love. We could go on forever, but I do want to ask you about the lottery and the combine. So first off, you had a chance to be inside the lottery room. I don't know if you've ever done that before in your career.
You did it last year.
Oh, you did it back-to-back years.
Yeah.
Highkin's got it. You're winning the lottery yourself, man. This is unbelievable. So what is that? Just kind of walk me through what that is like, and then we're all starting to look at mock drafts and 7-14. What? Just some of the names that maybe at the combine that are standing out of guys that you think maybe make sense or fit, or names that Blazer fans should keep their eye on.
So the lottery room process, the actual drawing of the names only takes like 5 or 10 minutes, because what they do is they draw out 4 ping pong balls and they read off the numbers on those balls, and then they have somebody who there's a giant one of the walls is just covered with all 1,000 combinations that are in small print. It's like takes up an entire wall of the room. And they just, when 4 balls are drawn out and the numbers are read off, that person kind of looks at the board and says which team has those numbers. And it's a pretty anticlimactic process. And then they still have our phones taken away until the thing is shown on TV. So after we know who's going to be picking where in the lottery, we have an hour to just kind of talk amongst ourselves. And last year, as you could imagine, they call out San Antonio at number 1, and it's everybody in the room is just like, oh my God, San Antonio is getting Wemby, and that's all anybody's talking about. And then, from Portland's end, they move up from 5 to 3, and it's like, there's a lot to talk about there, where it's like, are they going to get Scoot or Brandon Miller? Or are they going to trade the pick? Or are they going to get somebody to put with Dame? Like, there's a lot more to talk about when it's when the team that I'm covering moves up and there's a lot of intrigue around that pick, and B, that we now know who is getting this guy that everybody's been talking about as like the next generational superstar for the last 2 years. This year, Atlanta moved up from 10-1 with a 3% chance of moving up. And normally you would think that would be like everybody would just be freaking out because they had such a small chance of moving up. But when they call out Atlanta, everybody just kind of looks at each other and is like, okay, cool, I guess. Like that just speaks to just how little, I guess, juice or how little intrigue this draft has. And honestly, I think from what I've been able to talk to, I was at the Combine all week in Chicago, and what people I was able to talk to, I don't think people think this draft is bad as much as people don't think there's not a Wemby in this draft or an Anthony Edwards or a Paolo or, when you look at who a typical number one pick has been in the last 5 years, you're not really getting that level of talent at the top. But there's plenty of guys from what I've heard and what people have said at the Combine that you're going to get, if you draft smartly, which I think the Blazers, with wherever you want to land on the job that this front office has done since Joe Cronin took over and brought his staff in. The one thing I think everybody can agree that they're pretty good at is finding talent in the draft. And so if you draft well, even in this draft, you'll be able to find a rotation player or two.
Would you be stunned if they went point guard? I've seen some mocks that have them going Topic, the 6'6" kid that's 18 years old.
I would be stunned if they did that. That's the one thing. I don't think Topic is going to be the guy. I don't think either of the Kentucky guards are going to be what they go with. And look, I get it. There are people who say, you take the best player available, but it's are any of those guys so good? If you have a chance, it's just the way they felt about Scoot. They felt okay drafting Scoot, before, even though they had Dame and that was going to be kind of a weird, untenable situation. Are any of these guards in the draft, and I honestly don't know the answer to this because I don't watch a ton of college basketball, are, Rob Dillingham, Reed Shepherd, Nikola Topic, are any of them so good that you feel okay about about crowding out the backcourt situation that you already have with Anthony Simons and Scoot Henderson and Shaedon Sharpe and just adding kind of another layer to that? Are any of them such can't-miss prospects that you feel okay doing that and just kind of creating even more of a logjam there? Or if all of the talent level, if the kind of the relative talent level of these prospects to each other, there's not a huge drop-off in talent, which it seems like there isn't, and all these guys are kind of on the equivalent plane to each other, and it's just kind of an eye of the beholder situation. At that point, why wouldn't you just draft for need?
Hopefully sanity prevails on draft night, because I'm with you, Highkin. It wouldn't make any sense to me, and I too would be shocked, but it is the Blazers, so you never know. Sean Highkin, give him a follow on Twitter, @Highkin, Rose Garden Report. Go subscribe. You can check out his latest piece on Chauncey Billups, the contract situation, and what is to come, and what is looking like a lame duck year for the Blazers head coach. Thanks as always, man, for hopping on. Hopefully we can catch up again soon.
Yeah, good to talk to you guys.
There you go. Sean Highkin.